Welcome back, class. Mr. Rasmussen here. This is lesson 10B, and where we are right now, we are knee-deep in looking at bones in the skeletal system. And this lesson, I want to take a look at bone structure, what's going on inside of a bone that makes up that bone structure. Now, I wanted to start off by showing you this image here, and I really like this image, and I like it for one reason. It shows us that there is way more going on in bone than we maybe realize. So for instance, we see this big long cavity in here, this big hole throughout the center of the bone. That's kind of cool. There's this region of the bone kind of around in this area, and it kind of surrounds that hole, and you can see it. It's got like lots of holes in it. It doesn't look very strong. So there's that region of bone. And then you can see up here a different region entirely. It looks different. It looks more solid up here. And even there you can see a thin layer around the outside here that surrounds the bone. So lots going on, lots of cool layers. You can see that solid region of bone here. You can also see this thin region of bone here. So there's lots going on inside of bones, and that's what I want to talk about today, and that's what I want to make sense of, is what's going on inside of a bone. If we look at pictures, and that's what we're going to look at today, we're going to see lots of diagrams talking about bones. But let's first talk about this diagram. This is the overall structure of a bone. So if we're going to look at the overall structure, we're going to run into two types of bone tissue, or what we call osseous tissue. And the two types of bone tissue that we're going to run into a lot is compact bone and spongy bone. Compact bone, it's not labeled on here, but it's found right here. It's that area of bone that I said looked more solid, and it lines the majority of the bone. The majority of the bone is this compact bone. And then there are also these large regions of spongy bone here. So we can see spongy bone up here in the epiphysis. Okay, so we're going to run into compact bone tissue and spongy bone tissue, but they're found in here. If we divide up our long bone here, we notice that these end regions are called the epiphysis. And the middle regions, the center section of the long bone, is called the diaphysis. Okay, and inside of there, we have a bunch of things going on. We have some spongy bone up here in the epiphysis. We have, at the ends, we have some articular cartilage. So this would be the cartilage where the bone articulates with another bone. We also have a large central canal, the region in the middle. We call that the medullary cavity. Medullary cavity. And the medullary cavity is going to carry the yellow bone marrow, which has a lot of stored fat and nutrients in it. Okay, we also have some holes in the bone. These are called foramen. So anytime we see a hole in a bone, we call it a foramen, and it's usually to supply nutrients to the bone. We also have a couple of other layers that we kind of run into, a couple of other tissues. And these are called the endosteum and the periosteum. The endosteum, which is labeled here, sort of surrounds this medullary cavity. It's a thin layer of tissue that surrounds the layer of spongy bone and right on the edge of this medullary cavity. I outlined it in red there. And the endosteum promotes bone growth. It's going to promote bone growth. It's going to have cells that allow the bone to grow at that area. The other thing we see is this periosteum, and the periosteum, we can notice, is surrounding the outside of the bone. So it would be this thin tissue that surrounds the outside of the bone. I kind of pointed it out when we looked at the bone. I said the outside, you can kind of see the difference. That outside layer of the bone is called the periosteum. Okay, so those are the main regions of the bones: the epiphysis, the diaphysis, the medullary cavity, the spongy bone, the compact bone, the endosteum, and the periosteum. And then we also have articular cartilage. What I want to look at now is I want to break these regions up, and I want to look at them individually. So right now we're going to just take a section out of the compact bone and look just at compact bone. Okay, so here is a zooming up of compact bone. So if we look at compact bone, and we were to zoom in just a section of this compact bone. So this is the area. So here you can kind of see in the middle, this is that medullary cavity, right? And then we got spongy bone along the outside. But this region right here, from here to here, that region is the region we care about, and that's our compact bone. And if we look in this compact bone, there are these circles, and you can kind of see the outlining of them here. Those circles are called osteons. And they're these circles of bone tissue here, osteons, right there. There's an osteon. Inside that osteon, there are these layers, or these circular layers that go all the way around, and they're concentric circles. So you may have a circle here, and then you'll have a circle surrounding it, so they're concentric, and they're called lamellae. So these concentric circles of the osteon are called lamellae. And then inside there, there's also these little holes or spaces called lacunae. And the lacunae contain the osteocytes, and the osteocytes are bone cells. So within these osteons, we have these lamellae, which are these concentric circles. Then we also have these little holes called lacunae. We also have these canals in the center. A lot of times we just call them the central canal. You can call them the central canal here. And they contain blood vessels supplying blood to the bone cells. We can see out here, if we look at the bone, it outlined here, our picture outlined the periosteum for us. This outer layer of tissue, you can see it pulled back here. I'll outline that for you. They pulled back that periosteum. Okay, so those are the parts of compact bone. If we look at this picture here, we can see it a little better. So here's our osteon. So here's our osteon here. And then we see these circular rings in here. These circular rings, those are our lamellae. And then we see these holes. These holes in the bone. Those are the lacunae. Right here, those are the lacunae. And they contain our osteocytes, or our bone cells. So this compact bone is made up of these osteons, which contain blood vessels in the central canal, surrounded by lamellae, and then in the lamellae there are lacunae that contain bone cells. Excuse me. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. That's the structure of our compact bone. So make sure you have a good idea of that. The structure of a spongy bone is a lot simpler. The spongy bone just has these random columns of bone all over here, and then inside of it we have these air pockets, and they're not actually filled with air. They're filled with fluid, so I guess I should say fluid pockets. And in here, these fluid pockets contain the red marrow. So the medullary cavity in the middle of the bone, that little space in the middle of the bone, that contains yellow. It won't let me write yellow over here, but you know what I'm saying. So that cavity in the middle contains yellow marrow, but inside spongy bone it contains red marrow. And the red marrow is precursor to blood cells. So red marrow will become red and white blood cells. So they're maturing blood cells in there. There are maturing red blood cells, maturing white blood cells. There's also stem cells that allow us to create red and white blood cells. So inside of our spongy bone is where we find the red marrow, and that's the precursor to our blood cells. So that's really the structures of bone that I care that you know. Make sure you know these parts. If you have any questions, see me in class. We can take a look at some bones and you can point out these structures or these parts of the bone while you're in class. So feel free to ask me. Thanks a lot, class. Have a good day.